Well, welcome back, DIY car guys and car girls. As you can see, my hair is now growing back after my fight with my razor and gray hair. So I guess my gray hair, even if you cut it off, it grows back. What can you do? But today, we're going to do the EOIC method, which is exhaust opening, intake closing to set your lash for a solid roller cam. I've run solid roller cams on the street a lot. I know what to look for. The thing is that you might not, if you're not used to doing, solid roller cams on the street, how much you got to check your lash. I've heard people say 3,000 miles, whatever. I don't know how many miles it is when I check mine because I don't really drive mine that often anyways. It's not like I DD it for sure, but every now and then I'll pop the valve cover off and I'll check my lash and look for a couple of key things that is important that you look for on your solid roller street setup. So today, that's what we're talking about. Okay, before I go any further, someone's probably going to point out on your cam card, it's always probably going to have hot lash settings. All right, so I figured I'd go over this real quick. You see right here, hot settings. And if you see all these scribbled out numbers, don't worry about that. The cam builder, Dennis, he sets this through some dyno sims, and then he finds the cores for Urson, but Urson will call him back and say, based on the core, they would like to set the numbers up like this. So he confirms it, and then that's the reason why these numbers are based and scribbled out. That's because what the cam really is based off of these numbers. But anyways, so you look right here, the tighter clearance is always going to be on your intake side, right? And the exhaust is going to be the looser. The reason why is because when the piston comes up, it's chasing the exhaust valve. So you have to have a little more clearance on the exhaust side than your intake side. So the intake, you can always set up a little bit tighter. But like I said, this is based off of hot. So I have 18 set up on the intake and 20 set up on the exhaust. So when it warms up, it'll be closer to these settings in theory, but that's the reason why I'm doing mine like that. So you're supposed to warm your motor up to operating temperature, then set the lash. I'm gonna tell you right now, that is way easier said than done. You have to obviously pull your plugs off to get to your valve cover for one thing. So pulling them off, you have to wait till it's cool enough that you're not burning the crap out of your hand. You can wear gloves or whatever, but by the time you get to maybe your second cylinder, believe me, the thing's already cold. So what are you gonna do? Start it up like, 4 times and then do that whole process? I don't do that. I always do mine cold, and I set mine just a little bit tighter. There's probably a debate about whether if it expands so the clearances get tighter or do they grow. I've heard some people say that they grow on your lash for your rockers. Some people say they get tighter. I've asked Comp and them and a bunch of other people, and they say usually set it up a little bit tighter when it's cold, so that way when it expands, it gets to the correct lash that's on your card. And there's also, I don't think there's any really super correct lash in your card. When they put that on your cam card, that's a recommended lash. You can play around with that lash, you can get it looser or tighter, and your RPM curve will change just slightly by setting up your lash differently. So I set mine up a little bit tighter, so that's how I'm doing it, and I'm not gonna do it while it's hot. F that noise. Now, depending on your heads, you might have a little different setup. I have adjustable guide plates right here. And these are a must whenever your valves are not set up in the stock configuration right here. And the reason why is because the AFR moves these around to get a little better flow, or whatever their magic is they do to make these heads better. They move these valves around. A lot of these aftermarket 23-degree stuff, they move valves around. They changed a whole bunch of things throughout the years to get them to flow better because they're really not the best setup as far as heads go, but they do work. So back here you see, right in there, look, there is a little gap. And as you move those guide plates around, your tip of the rocker will go this way or that way. So it's important you get that tip centered on the top of your valve, so that way it's not pushing too much to the side, that way or that way. So that's what the purpose of that is, and they're held on and they're clamped down by the studs that go into your head. Some guys say they weld them up. I've never welded them. I never had these guys move. Once I set them up, I usually set them up, give them a good torque down, like, 75 foot-pounds. And then these guys, usually they don't move with me at all. So the first thing we're doing is we're gonna check this on each one. So I'm gonna go through a couple of them and I'll go over the process of what I do to get these guys to work correctly and just to make sure everything's hunky-dory. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so there's two ways you can bump your motor over or rotate it over to get these guys set up in the correct location to adjust your lash. Like I said, EOIC, exhaust opening, intake, closing. So you have to turn your motor over to do this. You do it by hand, by putting, a breaker bar on the crank and turn the motor over by hand. Or you can wire one of these guys up to your starter and you can just go bump, 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 bump. This is the easier way. It's harder for me to get to my starter now, and I undid that wiring for this guy, so we're gonna do it all by hand today. So this is probably the way most of you guys are gonna do it at first. So we're gonna do it like this. So let's go ahead and we're gonna do this one right here, easiest to see. Let's see it. Keep on watching it, see? It's going down. Let's go down a little more, a little more. Okay, so the exhaust, see right here, it's the exhaust. Easy to tell on a small block Chevy because it'll always be in line with this exhaust port right here. So your exhaust is going down. We can now check the lash for this guy right here. So this guy, let's recap real quick. I rotate the motor over and this guy is down, not halfway, but almost halfway. I figure that's a pretty good spot. You can check this a little higher, a little lower to see where your lash is in between this setting if you want. I just go right before halfway open and it usually seems to work pretty well. And like I said, your cam card will have this, how you choose to set up, where to use your cam card, the settings on your cam card, or you go a little bit tighter, that's up to you. So we're gonna check this guy right here, which is a tighter one, which is gonna be the 18. So let's check this guy real quick. And that actually feels like it hasn't moved at all. You kind of want to have it, I like mine to be just a little tight on there, that 18. So when I go to the next size up, if I can't push that in there, then I know that lash is pretty consistent right there. See that? So we're not even going to mess with this one because this one is good on the intake side. So now we're going to rotate the motor over and it's going to be, instead of the exhaust opening, it's going to be the intake closing. So this intake valve is going to go down, and as it comes back up a little bit past halfway, we're going to check the exhaust. So we're going to rotate the motor over. The exhaust is going down. It's coming back up. I said now the intake is going down, right? So exhaust opening, intake closing. So it's going to go all the way down. Now it's going to come back up. And then right around there, now we're at the bottom of the lope with the cam on the exhaust side. So we can now check this guy. So the exhaust is going to be the larger one. Let's see how this feels. And we are still pretty darn good. That feels good to me. So these guys haven't moved at all since the last time I checked the lash. So let's move on down the line and see if we can't find one to adjust. But before we move on, like I said before, make sure these guys are still centered on top of the valve right here. I have lashing locks on mine, so mine look bigger. So just make sure one side to the other is definitely centered over that. Because this guy's going to move back and forth some, so you want this side to be in the same position on top of the valve as this side when you push it over this way. So now that we know how to properly check our lash, using the EOIC method, I go one at a time down the line. So I'm going to go through this rest of these guys and hopefully I'll find one that needs to be set. So I'm going to go from here, work my way on to the back. And then when I find one that needs to be set, I'll show you guys the process, because with a stud girdle, you have to do this a certain way because all these guys are in a line right here, these studs, but they're not always perfectly, you know, machined. They might be a little bit that way or that way. So when this guy clamps on all these studs, some of these guys may just be slightly tweaked that way or that way, which will throw your lash off. So there's a particular procedure you have to do with these stud girdles, and I'll show you guys when I find one that needs to be set. Let's see here, the tighter one. Tighter clearance on the intake. That's pretty loose. So, undo the stud girdle. And then we'll undo, break the poly lock free right here. All right, so that's free. Take the poly lock, loosen it up so we can adjust it. And then we're just going to take this guy right here. Hopefully I ain't blocking. All right, so now it's getting tight. I move my hand so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so now we're going to tighten up the poly lock. Hold this still. See how that moved? That was a good one because it moved. Shows you how loose that can cause your lash to be if those threads are a little bit worn out like mine. So we need to go down here again and cinch it up just a little bit. A little more. And you can see it's just a feel process. It's going to take you a while to get used to it. A little bit tighter. All right. Now we're going to hold this so we don't move the lash. Tighten up the poly lock good and tight. And then we will cinch it. That still feels pretty good. Let's get one more little cinch. Moves out the way so you can see. A little bit tighter, there we go. I like that, feels better. Like I said, it's just a feel thing. And then we're gonna tighten up the stud girdle. All right, it's good and tight. Check again. Still feels good. All right, so everything is now buttoned back up. This is my first 93 pump gas tune that I put in this guy. I have a couple of degrees out, and the weather's been cool enough out there that doesn't seem like it wants to detonate. The plugs look acceptable, so let's go out and try this 93 pump gas tune and have some fun.